What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Sam here to break down the NFL wide receivers on Draftkings for the Sunday Week 8 main slate. Got a lot of good wide receivers to get into. Some guys that I think are going to go a little bit overlooked, and some guys that I think are just going to be super chalky, but we'll get into all that stuff. If you're new here, make sure to leave a like on this channel, subscribe. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, turn on notification bell. All that stuff really helps me grow. I've had a lot of growth throughout NASCAR, NBA, NFL. Want to continue that growth, trying to hit 400 subscribers by Thanksgiving, so help me get there. It's very appreciated. If you want to subscribe to my Patreon, I'll put the link in the description below. Only $10 a month for a bunch of articles, bunch of rankings, bunch of stats and stuff, so be sure to check all that out. Let's get into the video. We're going to start out with Stefan Diggs going against the New England Patriots. This is kind of a tough matchup for him. The line of this game is only at 43, and they are favored in this game. The Patriots have allowed the 17th most points to opposing wide receivers this year. Diggs is probably going to get a lot of Stephon Gilmore, who is one of the best corners in the league. When we go look at Diggs, he does have 17 red zone targets and 5 end zone targets, so he is getting a lot of targets in the red zone and the high point total targets. When we go look at the usage, he's averaging 8.6 targets per game, and this is not including Week 5 and Week 7 when John Brown was out. John Brown is back now, so averaging 8.6 with John Brown on the field. So, he's going to get a ton of usage. It is kind of a tough matchup. Probably only going to be a tournament option for me. I don't really know if I'm going to get a ton of Stefan Diggs. It's just not a game that I really want to get a ton of ownership on just because of how low the total is, but it is still Stefan Diggs, so we still talk about him. Jameson Crowder, assuming he returns this week against Kansas City Chiefs. He's in, kind of a tough matchup. The Chiefs allowed the 27 most points to wide receivers, but the Jets will be playing from behind. And we know Jameson Crowder gets peppered with targets. We'll talk about that in a second. He's in the slot, which is definitely a more favorable spot against the Chiefs secondary. Kind of tough spot on the outside, but yeah, Jameson Crowder, the game total set at 45.5. They're not favored. They will be playing from behind. The Chiefs defense has been good this year, but I don't think it's as good as the numbers show. So, they are playing the Jets, though, so that is something to notice. Jameson Crowder really only has 5 targets in the red zone and 1 in the end zone. Not getting a ton of usage in the end zone that we'd like to see, but he is still averaging 13 a game right now. Dude's just getting targeted every single game, so a ton of spots. Whether it's Darnold, whether it's Joe Flacco, they just love throwing it to Jameson Crowder. He's really the best player in this offense, so he's definitely someone to go after. Denzel Mims is only $3,200. He's like a cheap guy if you want to look for in cash games, and honestly, even if you want to play him in tournaments, I think he's viable. He's on the Jets as well, so everything's same game script, same everything. In last game, he saw 7 targets, so I don't know if he's going to see 7 again. To be fair, there was no Jameson Crowder. I'm not saying he's a lock or anything, but I think you can get him in cash games just to really free up salary for you if you want. He looked pretty good. I think he's a rookie wide receiver, 2nd round draft pick. He's been hurt all year. Finally came back, and he looked good. So I think he's going to be utilizing this offense going forward. They drafted him in the 2nd round. He should be, and he was a good prospect. Definitely someone that I liked, and a lot of scouts did like as a prospect. So I think he's a good player. And at $3,200, that's really cheap. So I don't hate going there. Next, we'll go to Marquis Brown going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. That's going to be a really good game. We go look at the lines of 46.5 total. Not really that high. The Ravens are favored, but the Steelers' passing defense has not been that great. They've allowed the 8th most points to wide receivers so far this year, so they have been vulnerable against the receivers. They've been really good against tight ends. Tight ends don't do crap against them. They've been really good against the run, even though Derrick Henry had a pretty solid fantasy game last week, but that was really he got bailed out with a touchdown. But Marquis Brown, he's a guy who can explode. I don't think a lot of people are going to play him because he is playing Pittsburgh, and I always like to play like low owned Marquis Brown. He usually is low owned just because I know he has that ceiling that we just love to see attacked. So I'm definitely interested in him. When we go look at the usage, he does have 12 red zone targets and 4 end zone targets. That's more than he was doing last year, getting more usage down towards the end of the field. When we go look at targets overall, he's averaging 7 per game, so kind of not the highest floor. It's a decent floor, so definitely only going to be a tournament option for me, but I do want to get some exposure there. I do think he has some upside. Now we're going to go to the Tennessee Titans and Cincinnati Bengals game. We're going to start the Bengals. Tyler Boyd, AJ Green, T. Higgins. I'm interested in all 3 of these guys. The Titans have allowed the 6th most points to opposing wide receivers this year. The only somewhat difficult matchup is T. Higgins, who's probably going to get Jonathan Joseph, who's been pretty solid this year, but I'm still really not too worried about it. I absolutely love Tyler Boyd in the slot. They've been bad against slot receivers. We saw Juju just absolutely turn him up last week. There's been some other games where slot receivers have had good games. Even Cole Beasley had a good game against them. So that's going to be a spot to definitely attack. Tyler Boyd's definitely one of my favorite wide receiver plays on the slate, and I love the Cincinnati Bengals stack because Burrow's not that expensive, and neither of these guys are. I think Boyd's $6,600, and that's the most expensive out of all these guys. So they're not expensive stacks. When we go look at the usage, we're seeing Tyler Boyd has 17 red zone targets, which I think is, yeah, that's tied with Stefan Diggs for the most on the slate. He also has 4 end zone targets. AJ Green has 13 red zone targets, but 8 end zone targets. AJ Green has 8 end zone targets and 0 touchdowns. That regression's got to change. So AJ Green is definitely someone that I definitely want to target. I think, he got a bad rap the first few weeks, but him and Burrow have become in sync. He's been doing pretty well the last few weeks, and he's only $4,500. I really like that spot as well. I think Tyler Boyd, AJ Green stacks are going to be a great way to go, but I also really like T. Higgins. 10 red zone targets, 5 end zone targets. All of them are getting utilized down there. When we go look at overall targets, like Boyd's averaging 8.7, Green's averaging 8.2, and T. Higgins is averaging 6.1. The guys are just all getting used in the passing game, and it's going to be a game where they're going to be playing from behind. And the Titans defense just isn't that good. So I think this is definitely a spot to attack them. I've pretty much talked in the quarterbacks video. I love Burrow stacks. They're my favorite stack of the week, and it's really not even that close. So I definitely want to go there. I think this is definitely a spot to attack. I definitely like some of all 3 of these guys. If you want to play them by themselves, I think that's fine too. If you want to get them in cash, I think all of them are fine in cash. Probably Higgins not as much as the other 2 in cash, but they're all still great cash plays. Jarvis Landry and Rashard Higgins for the Cleveland Browns going up against the Vegas Raiders this week are going to be my next 2 guys to go after. Now, the Raiders, another defense isn't good, allowed 9th most points to wide receivers this year. The line on this game is at 53.5. The Browns are slightly favored, but this looks like a game that could shoot out. So these are definitely 2 guys I'm going to want in stacks. Rashard Higgins is only $4,200. So Odell Beckham's out for the season. So last week we pretty much saw the entire game without Odell. There was 1 drive Odell played, and then that was it. Tore his ACL. Sucks, but now you got these 2 guys stepping up, and we've seen Rashard Higgins have a lot of chemistry with Baker Mayfield in the past. When you go look at the usage on the year, they both saw 6 targets last week, and that's pretty much the main thing I feel like we should go off of without Odell Beckham. Both seeing 6 targets. I think they're both fine in Baker stacks. I definitely like Rashard Higgins more because he's only $4,200. That's pretty cheap, and definitely something I want to get some exposure to. I think he's good in cash games. The Vegas defense just is not that good, so definitely a spot to attack. Up next, we'll go to A.J. Brown and Corey Davis for the Tennessee Titans going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. This is the other side of that those Bengals receivers that we loved. They're favored in this game, but still a super high total of 55. The Bengals have allowed the 16th most points to wide receivers this year. A.J. Brown does draw a pretty tough matchup against William Jackson III, but I'm not really that worried about it. He's not that good, not a cornerback that I'm just scared to go to. But Corey Davis on the other side is going to get a fantastic matchup against Darius Phillips. Not a good corner at all. So those are 2 guys that are going to have some really good matchups. A.J. Brown has 7 red zone targets and 3 end zone targets. Davis has 5 red zone targets and 3 end zone targets. Now remember, these guys have played limited games. Brown's only played 4. I think Davis only has 2. So that 3 in 2 games is pretty good for Corey Davis. He's definitely gotten more utilized in this offense, and nobody's going to play him. He's averaging 9 targets per game right now, and Brown's only averaging 8. So that's definitely something that stands out to me. These, the 2 games that Corey Davis and A.J. Brown have played, that's what I meant by that. Corey Davis is averaging 9 targets a game, and he's getting usage in the red zone, and he's really cheap. I think he's like $4,900 or something like that. He's really cheap on this slate, and he's definitely someone I want to attack. A.J. Brown, another one. He's just got, ridiculous ceiling. We know what he can do. He's an absolute stud. I think he's a little too cheap as well. I think he should be up in the 7K range by now. I think that might change after this week. So I think these are 2 guys I definitely want. I love the Tennessee stacks, and I think these are 2 of my favorite guys to stack them with. I definitely want to attack them. Tyree Kill is probably going to be pretty popular on the slate because he's only $6,700, and he's Tyree Kill. They're playing the New York Jets. It's going to be a great matchup because the Jets just suck. He's going to be in the slot against Brian Poole, which is actually kind of a tough matchup because Brian Poole is actually a pretty solid corner. But outside that, I'm not really that worried about it. Tyree Kill has 15 red zone targets this year, which is kind of shocking. He's not usually that guy. And 4 end zone targets. So, he's getting used down there. Recently, we hadn't seen a ton of targets until last game where we saw 10 in the snow. Tyree Kill is only going to be a tournament guy for me because he really, before we had an 11 target game week 2 and a 10 target game week 7 and then 6, 6, 6, and 3. That's not really a great number to look for cash. He is only $6,700, and we know the explosion that Tyree Kill can have. So he's definitely someone I want to get some interest in tournaments, but in cash games I'm probably going to look other ways, especially because the Chiefs should get up on his team pretty fast, and then they're probably going to slow to breaks. So unless Tyreek Hill has a insane game really early in the game, which can happen, that totally can happen, not going to rule that out, he's probably not going to be doing much in at least the 4th quarter. Maybe the Jets will keep it close and they'll shock the world, but come on, do we really expect that? Up next we got Henry Ruggs going against the Cleveland Browns. They're not favored in this game. 53.5 game total, tied for the second highest on the slate of 3 games. The the Browns have allowed the third most points to wide receivers so far this year. And if we want Derek Carr stacks, we're going to have to find someone to stack Derek Carr outside Darren Waller. And I think Henry Ruggs is the most likely one. I mean, Nelson Aguilar had a 9-target game last week, but that's like been it for him. Henry Ruggs is he's only averaging 3.5 targets per game. It's not really that great, but Henry Ruggs has access to a ridiculous ceiling. We know what he can do. He can have a 70-yard touchdown anywhere he wants. He's like a Marquis Brown type player. He's like literally Marquis Brown a year ago. That's similar to me. I think Ruggs is probably the better prospect, and long term is going to be better, but the guy just opens up the field. And if I don't think Denzel Ward's going to be on him most of the game. I mean, he's going to get some Denzel Ward for sure, but if he gets any of the other guys, he's just going to be able to torch them. This guy's a stud. So I think Henry Ruggs is, only 4,700 or something like that. He's cheap. He's definitely someone I want to get some exposure to. I think he's a very, very good play. In tournament, I'll say this. I only want Henry Ruggs if I'm stacking with Derek Carr, though. I don't want Henry Ruggs probably by himself. It's just if I'm doing Derek Carr stacks, which I think is a pretty solid stack this week, I think Henry Ruggs is definitely a spot I want to get to. And I don't think Ruggs is going to be high owned. People are probably just going to do Darren Waller with Derek Carr, which is fine. I want Darren Waller too. But usually I like to do double stacks, and I think Henry Ruggs gets you some leverage off of all the chalk that's going to be Carr and Waller. So if you do Carr, Waller, and Ruggs, that's going to be some differentiation. I didn't put Nelson Aguilar in this video, but he's fine too. He's definitely someone that can get into that stack and be in that winning lineup. I don't really want any of Hunter Renfrow though. He's just kind of catch and fall guy. Keenan Allen's going to be really popular again because Draftkings left him at like the same price. He's 6,200, which is absolutely ridiculous. This game only does have a 44.5 game total against the Broncos. They are favored. Broncos have allowed the 15th most points to wide receivers, and he is going to draw a pretty tough matchup with Bryce Callahan in the slot, but I'm really not that worried about that. Like, he's a rookie, and Keenan Allen's just so good. He's one of those guys that's kind of matchup proof in my opinion. Allen's getting used in the red zone, 12 red zone targets, 5 end zone targets. On the year, he's averaging 12.2 targets per game outside this game where he got hurt right there in the first quarter. That's not included in that stat. So Keenan Allen getting an absolute ton of usage. Just 12 targets for 6,200 is just way too cheap, so I want to go there. Allen Robinson's someone I think is going to go very under-owned this week because he's in that price range with Davonte Adams, Adam Thielen, Lockett, Metcalf. All those guys are going to get more ownership than Allen Robinson, I'd say, because they're all in like high-scoring games. They're the bigger names. Especially like Lockett exploding for 55 last week. We all know what DK Metcalf can do. Thielen's in that great game. Adams is in that great game. So like Allen Robinson probably isn't going to get as much ownership. But I think Allen Robinson could be a great leverage play this week. They're going up against the New Orleans Saints. It's the lowest total game on the slate. I'm not going to lie. 43.5. They're not favored in this game. That's great, though. That's going to means they're going to be playing from behind, a lot more throwing. The Saints allowed 11 most points to opposing wide receivers this year, and he's going to get a lot of Marshawn Lattimore, who on name value, everyone's like, oh, Marshawn Lattimore, he's so good. Marshawn Lattimore has been terrible this year. He's been the 15th worst coverage grade corner according to PFF. That's really bad. So Marshawn Lattimore's been terrible. So that I'm not worried about that at all. Like that actually, I like that a lot. Allen Robinson seeing 13 red zone targets and 5 end zone targets so far this year. When we go look at the targets, he's averaging 10 a game, and he only saw 4 against the Rams last week, but he was getting shadowed by Jalen Ramsey a lot that game, so that's kind of understandable. And that game Nick Foles was horrible, and Nick Foles could be horrible again, and that's going to ruin Allen Robinson. I'm not saying that's not. He's definitely not going to be as safe as someone like Adams or Thielen, I feel like, this week, especially with the ownership. But if Allen Robinson gets one of these 10-plus target games, gets a touchdown or two, he's going to be huge, optimal lineup. And I'm telling you, Marshawn Lattimore is not someone to be scared of. Until he really shows me that he can shut down people this year, I'm not going to go away from the Saints secondary at all. Kenny Galilei going up against the Indianapolis Colts. He's kind of got a tough matchup, but he's Kenny Galilei, and we know what he can do. He can explode for huge games all the time. The line on this game is set at 50. The Detroit Lions are not favored. They are going to be playing from behind, but the Colts have only allowed the 20th most points to opposing wide receivers this year, and he has a really tough matchup against Xavier Rhodes, who has been a shutdown corner this year, one of the best in the league. Off of that horrible year last year. Galilei has 9 red zone targets and 3 end zone targets. And we got to remember Kenny Galilei, he's only played, 4 games this year, 3 games this year. So, we can go look at the targets. Yeah, 4 games this year for Kenny Galilei. So, of course, we're going to see a little bit lower target share in the red zone, end zone. But the fact that he's kind of already up with some of these numbers with these other guys who have been playing a ton of all the games, that shows that Galilei is getting a lot of usage down there. He's averaging 7 targets a game, which isn't as safe as some of these other guys, but the targets he gets a lot of downfield targets, a lot of end zone targets. So Kenny Galilei is definitely someone I do like to go after. He has a high ADOT right there, 14.82 average depth of target, so that's really good. So Kenny Galilei definitely someone I want to get after. in tournaments. Don't want to go there for cash. Davonte Adams is great. Like, I mean, everyone's going to be playing Davonte Adams this week. What the heck happened here? Okay. Davonte Adams is going to... that was weird. He's got Minnesota. Secondary's terrible. Allowing his second most points to wide receivers. Game's 53.5. They're favored. I mean, he's got Cameron Dantzler is horrible. He's averaging right now 14 targets per game. Like, everyone's going to be playing Davonte Adams. I'm not going to tell you not to. He's a great play. I wouldn't avoid him. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen for the Minnesota Vikings. This is a spot that, I mean, a lot of people are going to get to. I think Thielen's going to get Jair Alexander, who's a shutdown corner this year, but he did have a good game against Jair week 1. Had over 100 yards and a touchdown against Green Bay, but Jair's still the highest graded corner according to PFF right now. It's been a tough spot, but Adam Thielen's kind of torched him his whole career, so I'm really not too scared to go there, but I do think if Adam Thielen does start getting a ton of ownership, there is warrant to just go to Justin Jefferson, because, I mean, this guy has ridiculously high ceilings as well, and the other side of the ball, especially if Kevin King misses again, that's going to be a great spot for Justin Jefferson. They're going to be playing from behind. The game's 53.5 game total. Yeah, the Packers only allowed 21st most points to wide receivers. Not really too worried there. Thielen does have 16 red zone targets and 9 end zone targets. That's a lot. I think he's got the most end zone targets in the league right now, at least on this slate. Justin Jefferson isn't getting a ton of usage down there, so that's a little bit scary, but still definitely, I mean, he has such a high ceiling that I definitely want to get him in tournaments. Jefferson's definitely not touching him in cash. Thielen's fine for cash, though. Jefferson averaging 6 targets per game and Thielen averaging 8.2, so both in good spots. I want to get exposure to both of them in tournaments, but again, if Thielen starts getting really popular, I'm going to go to Justin Jefferson, and vice versa. If Jefferson gets really popular, I'll go to Thielen. I don't really think Justin Jefferson's going to get too popular. He'll probably get some ownership because of this game, but not a ton where we really got to worry about it. Cooper Kupp, I love Cooper Kupp. I think he's another guy that's not going to go too highly owned this week. Going up against the Miami Dolphins, yeah, the total's only 46, and they are favored. But he's going to get Nick Needham, who's been terrible, 4th worst corner according to PFF right now. Nick Needham in the slot has been bad. Cooper Kupp, 7 red zone targets, 2 end zone targets. He's averaging 7.3 targets per game, so he's definitely in a good spot. I think I love going to Cooper Kupp. Brandon Ayuk, another one I absolutely love. I love playing receivers against Seattle, man, because Seattle's pass defense is horrible. Their defense overall is just bad. This game is a 53.5 game total. They are not favored in this game. Deebo Samuel's out for a few weeks now, so Brandon Ayuk's number 1 receiver. I mean, Kill's still the number 1 target, but Ayuk's number 1 receiver now. He's going to get Shaq Griffin, who has not been good this year. They're allowing Ayuk has 11 red zone targets and 4 end zone targets on the year, and he even gets some rushes every once in a while in the end zone. Without Deebo Samuel on the field, only averaging 5.33 targets per game. But even games with Deebo Samuel, like 7 and 6 targets, like he can get more than that. He's definitely someone that I want to get some exposure to at $5,800. I think he's fine for cash if you want to go there, but I love him in tournaments. I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be a great play in tournaments this week, and I want to get a ton of exposure. And then Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, like, we all know what they can do. I mean, yeah, the 49ers have been a kind of tough defense against receivers this year, but I don't really care. I mean, Lockett saw 20 targets last week. I mean, he had 53 points in Draftkings or whatever, maybe 55 on Draftkings, 53 in fantasy football. I don't know. One of those two. Ridiculous game from him. Lockett has 13 red zone targets and 7 end zone targets. Metcalf has 14 red zone targets and 6 end zone targets, getting usage everywhere. Metcalf has that high A that was 16.68. We go look at targets per game. Lockett's averaging 9.66. Metcalf averaging 7.33. They're both great plays, have a ton of upside. Want them in tournaments. Probably won't go there in cash, but love them in tournaments. But yeah, I think that's really all I got to say about the wide receivers on this slate. Had a lot of good information to get into. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe on the channel. Leave a comment. Tell me who you think the best wide receiver play on the slate is below in the comments. But I think that's really all I got to say. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we're going to make some money this weekend.